am Bobbi Hudson, and I run a group called the Pacific Shellfish Institute, and we do shellfish-related research, as our name may indicate, all along the West Coast, including here in Alaska. But today, we're going to talk about what are harmful algal blooms. So first and foremost, we want to get to the point that not all algal blooms are harmful. Like, that seems pretty obvious, but most are beneficial to the ecosystem. We're talking about the base of the food chain. So harmful algal blooms specifically produce toxins, or they cause harmful conditions when in high concentration, so affecting any different aspect of the ecosystem, or many different aspects of the ecosystem. So the three that we most commonly talk about with respect to shellfish and consuming shellfish and having a toxic event that is harmful to humans are Alexandrium, Pseudonycha, and Dinophyces. And so Dinophyces causes diuretic shellfish poisoning, and so that is diuretic shellfish toxins, or DST, which are harmful to humans. And this is something that the algae does exist here in Alaska, but this isn't something that we've had illnesses in commercial shellfish here in Alaska, but it is something that is monitored. The one in the middle, Pseudonycha, is amnesic shellfish poisoning, or ASP, and this is something you often hear about with respect to crab, Dungeness crabs specifically, or razor clams on the outer coast, all along the coast. But again, this is not something that has been a problem here in Alaska with commercial shellfish. It is monitored, however. And then the one we really worry about, and unfortunately is quite common here in Alaska, is Alexandrium. So that's paralytic shellfish poisoning, or PSP, that's caused by algae that contains paralytic shellfish toxins, which are harmful to humans. So if we go back to this side here, so the Dinophyces, this is the symptoms, which any of these, the symptoms can occur anywhere from an hour within consuming shellfish that are contaminated with these algae to a couple hours later. So it's not something that's going to happen days later. It's fairly rapidly, but the DSP is something that we have dealt with more and more frequently in Washington State, where I live most of the year. This is something that causes nausea, vomiting, and good thing we're all done with eating. Hopefully, we're into some things that are not so fun to talk about, but I'm trying to get through this slide a little quicker. But so yeah, nausea, vomiting, ASP, a little bit more serious symptoms there. Headache, dizziness, short-term memory loss is probably the most concerning aspect, and that memory loss can be permanent. But PSP has all those list of symptoms there and can even cause death. So this is something very serious that is monitored and managed for commercial shellfish. And to be clear, there's other things that we concern ourselves with shellfish and are managed very well. Vibrio parahemolyticus is not a huge issue here in Alaska, but other things you hear about, like cruise ship things, norovirus. So those are bacteria. But what I am sharing with you today is biotoxins. So very different things. Bacteria, we can cook those out. Biotoxins, the PSP, the ASP, the DST, you can't cook those out. Those are chemically. So they're produced by microscopic plants in the shellfish, or that the shellfish eat, and then it's concentrated in the tissue, and it can't be cooked out. You can't heat it up, you can't freeze it and get rid of it. It's chemical. Where with bacteria, yes, you can cook those out. So can you remove biotoxins by depuration, is something we talk about in shellfish world, or purging in clean water? I mean, certainly something that I grew up doing. You harvest clams and you put them in a bucket and you let them spit for a while to get that sand out, right? But no, we absolutely cannot get rid of these toxins. It's effective with things like E. coli, the bacteria that I talked about on that last slide, but not effective with biotoxins. So you can't just put them in a bucket and expect them to purge. So we have systems in place that must be followed. So what about, here's another thing we hear about here in Alaska too. If my area's been okay historically, can I assume that it's okay now? My grandma harvested on this beach forever, so I must be able to harvest on this beach. No, absolutely not. Harmful algal blooms are unpredictable and they change over time. And we talk about things like climate change, and these algae are moving into different places, and long-term monitoring is the key to understanding these, but it's still unpredictable. So no, just because my grandma harvested and have personal experience with this. It's like, oh yeah, go ahead kids, go out and harvest from there because we always did. No, that's not a good idea. So the shellfish really must be tested every time to ensure safety. So another thing that we think about with regard to harmful algal blooms and plankton is, what if those plankton species are present? Does that necessarily mean that the shellfish are toxic? It doesn't, actually. So you can have certain plankton species show up in a plankton tow, you look at it under a microscope, that's not always directly correlated to toxin. So there are a number of different species that you kind of have the perfect cocktail of ocean condition, of iron and temperature, heat, temperature, salinity, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're toxic. With things like PSP though, the Alexandrium shell that I showed you, that beautiful linkage there, that is one that if you see that in plankton tow, if we're seeing that under the microscope, yeah, that's a no-go zone. We are going to be concerned about that. But some of these other species, just because the plankton in the water doesn't necessarily mean that the toxins are there. So bottom line, when we're talking about commercial shellfish, the shellfish that we're getting in restaurants, at grocery stores, those are coming from commercially harvested areas. And so those are licensed, certified growers, and they have a rigorous process that they have to go through to test their shellfish, particularly for those PSTs. So those harvest operations must meet these standards, and the shellfish they harvest are tested for biotoxins. And commercially tested shellfish are safe to eat, but the sustained monitoring and lot testing of shellfish meat is the only proven solution to HAB avoidance. And in taking my assignment seriously of being quick, there are some other networks that for folks that are harvesting recreationally can utilize. So there's a lot of resources out there if you want to harvest and ship to a Sea-Tour network or others that are available. But when we're talking about commercial shellfish, if you're seeing it in a restaurant, if you're seeing it in the grocery store, you can be assured that that product is safe.